Cannabis isn't just a plant, it's a test, and most people fail it. You've been told marijuana is medicine or a menace, a spiritual doorway or a mind-numbing escape, sacred or sinful. But here's the truth. None of those labels really capture what this plant is all about. Cannabis doesn't fit neatly into your beliefs. It amplifies whatever's already inside you, and that's what makes it so powerful and risky. In ancient traditions, marijuana was never just a pastime. It was a portal, a tool for transformation used only by those ready to face themselves fully. No filters, no distractions. Shamans, mystics, and seekers used it to break down the ego, not decorate it. Today, though, the plant is everywhere, sold like candy, smoked as a trend, worshipped as a lifestyle. What was once a sacred ritual has turned into routine. The divine has become entertainment. This isn't a video about whether marijuana is good or bad. It's about what it does to your soul. Long before joints and dispensaries, cannabis was handled with care and respect by those who understood which door they were opening. At the dawn of civilization, it wasn't recreational. It was sacred, aligned with fasting, prayer, and solitude. In ancient India, it was offered to Shiva, the god of destruction and transformation, who dissolves illusions so truth can emerge. His followers, the sadhus, didn't smoke for fun. They smoked to die to the ego. The chillum wasn't an accessory. It was a sacrament. In Taoist alchemy, cannabis was mixed with other herbs to refine energy, cultivate inner silence, and spark visionary dreams. It wasn't used to dull the senses, but to sharpen subtle awareness. Ancient texts describe it as a spirit ally that can either sharpen your perception or throw your energy out of balance, depending on your inner state. For those unprepared, it wasn't a gift. It was a test. Sufi mystics used hashish in ceremonies to dissolve the self into the divine presence, though even among them the plant was controversial. Rumi warned about intoxication that looks like awakening but leaves the soul untouched. The plant was honored only when it led to ego death, not ego inflation. It had to be handled like a sword, with respect, or it would cut its wielder. For the Rastafari, cannabis is ganja, the herb of wisdom, the healing of nations. It's not just smoked. It's prayed over and brought into reasoning sessions, where words and smoke blend in a shared search for truth. It's a tool for connection, not escape, always part of ritual. In those sacred circles, cannabis isn't consumed to forget the world, but to remember the divine within it. And yet here we are in the modern West, where a sacred sacrament has become a souvenir. What once required preparation now requires nothing. You can buy cannabis at a drive-thru, light up between texts, scroll through meaningless content while floating in synthetic calm. The plant is the same, but the context has changed, and without ritual, cannabis loses its way. When ceremony disappears, all that's left is sensation. And sensation without direction is just indulgence. The danger isn't the plant itself, but treating something once sacred like entertainment. Cannabis offers no consistency, only amplification. If your feet are steady, it grounds you deeper. If you're lost, it magnifies the chaos. Most people don't realize they're entering a temple with muddy shoes, then wonder why they only see shadows. The truth is, the plant doesn't decide where you go. It holds up a mirror. That mirror reflects everything. Your fears, your unresolved pain, your unspoken questions. It doesn't care about your vibe, but about your intention. That's why in most traditions, the real ritual was preparation, fasting, chanting, silence, purification, all before the first inhale. Not superstition, but understanding that the mind must be steady before it expands. Used with respect, cannabis isn't a drug, but a door. And doors open both ways. They lead to light and shadow. The biggest illusion is thinking you can handle both when you're unprepared. There's a reason so many people report anxiety, paranoia, or feeling watched when they smoke. Most blame a bad strain, wrong dosage, or chemistry. But what if the problem isn't the weed, but that the plant is doing exactly what it always does, cutting through noise, piercing illusions, revealing what's underneath? Carl Jung called this the shadow. Parts of your psyche you've rejected, forgotten, or avoided. They're not evil, just uncomfortable. Not malicious, just irritating. The pain you haven't processed, the anger you swallowed, the truths you ignored. The plant doesn't create these. It reveals them as an amplifier. It doesn't make the music. It turns up the volume on what's already playing, and for many, that music is unresolved pain. This is the side of cannabis most don't talk about because it doesn't sell as well as relaxation or good vibes. But any serious spiritual practitioner will tell you, the path to awakening always starts in the underworld. Not with visions but discomfort. Not with light but confrontation. Cannabis, when used consciously, can be one of the most powerful tools for that. If you're ready. If you're willing to see your true self without the mask. In mystical psychology, that moment of exposure is sacred. Not failure, but invitation. The anxiety after a hit, the spiraling self-awareness, the rising paranoia, they aren't glitches, they're feedback. Your system is reacting to change. It's not losing control but breaking down your filters. Your internal watchdogs panicking because the ego fortress is breached. Modern culture gives no guidance for this. You're alone, staring at the ceiling with your heart racing, wondering why you feel like you're dissolving. And the truth is, you are. That's what the plant does. It dissolves the fake. It burns away performance. And if you're unprepared, it can feel like a nightmare. Not because the plant is wrong, but because the encounter is real. Esoteric traditions understood this. In writings on psychic self-defense, John Fortune described altered states that make the etheric body porous, vulnerable not just to perception, but to outside energetic influence. If your inner world is chaotic, cannabis won't fix that. It will amplify the chaos so healing can begin. But healing has to happen. If you run, numb out, or distract yourself from what surfaces, the cycle just keeps repeating, hit after hit, until nothing feels sacred anymore. Only noise. That's why cannabis, even though it's natural, isn't automatically safe. It doesn't distinguish between who's ready and who isn't, or who should see and who should stay asleep. It just pulls back the curtain, and what you do with what you find is on you. The biggest misconception is thinking the plant should make you feel good. That's the lie. The truth is it should make you see. Pain, joy, confusion. Everything is information. Your spirit saying, look at this. But because we're trained to fear discomfort, we call those moments bad trips and walk away empty. No reflection, no growth. Just another story about how marijuana made us anxious. Cannabis doesn't cause anxiety. It reveals the anxiety you already had. It didn't create discomfort. It uncovered it. That makes it one of the most honest substances you'll ever encounter. But honesty isn't always gentle, and truth isn't always easy. The plant is a mirror, and sometimes what it shows isn't pretty. But maybe that's exactly what you need to see. One of the biggest spiritual traps is confusing sensation with truth. And cannabis, more than almost any other plant, lures us into that trap. You feel enlightened, open, thoughts deepen, music sounds richer. Coincidences seem like hidden messages. Your journal fills with insights you wouldn't write sober. Everything feels mystical, meaningful. But does that actually change you? A high can be seductive. It mimics transcendence, mimics peace. But mimicry isn't integration. Feeling expanded isn't the same as being whole. Cannabis can create the illusion of spiritual clarity without the foundation to hold it. And that's what makes it risky. Not because it harms your body, but because it tricks your soul into thinking it's arrived. You start believing you've evolved just because you felt something profound. But depth isn't measured by intensity. It's measured by what you take from the experience and how you live when it fades. Many regular users report sudden insights about trauma, a sense of unity with life, a feeling of presence, and that's real. But the danger shows up when those insights drift without grounding, without integration. They turn into what esoteric teachers call spiritual inflation, the ego swelling around a feeling of transformation without doing the work to support it. Hermetic and occult traditions call this false light, experiences that seem bright but are just mental simulations. In Kabbalah, it's the sphere of Hod, the brilliance of intellect separated from real truth. It shines like gold, but crumbles like ash. You thought you saw the light, but only saw the mirror. It's no surprise that many long-term users start mixing up perception with identity. They use the experience instead of integrating it. They become performatively spiritual, quoting mystics and philosophers, yet their lives don't change. Their patterns stay the same. Their relationships don't deepen. Their pain doesn't dissolve. It only sounds more poetic. The plant becomes a prop in a performance of progress. As Osho said, substances open doors that only silence should open. He didn't deny their power. He warned about their instability. A forced door doesn't stay open, and the vision it offers can distort reality if the mind isn't ready. The high can turn into a pedestal you look down from at those who haven't seen what you have, when in fact nothing was seen clearly, only felt strongly. The problem isn't insight, but what you do with it. Cannabis can give perspective, but unless that perspective becomes practice, it's just a stimulus. If it doesn't change how you handle conflict, face your shadow, serve others, or endure suffering, then it's just a spiritual distraction pretending to be awakening. And that's the danger. Not the plant, not the smoke, but the story you tell yourself about what it means. Euphoria isn't truth. It's a gateway. But if you stand at the door forever thinking you've arrived, you'll never enter. You become addicted not to the substance, but to the illusion of progress. And that illusion is harder to detox from than any chemical addiction. That's why deep spiritual traditions never worship the high. They used it to point toward something deeper. They never glorified the vision. They asked what it required. Because true awakening isn't what happens on the plant, but what happens afterward. In the silence that follows, in the choices you make, in the humility of realizing that seeing something once isn't the same as understanding it. Cannabis offers access, not arrival. The world doesn't need more access. It needs more anchors. People who don't just visit the sacred but live it, who don't just feel truth but embody it. Cannabis touches not only the mind, but the subtle body, the invisible architecture of your being that holds your thoughts, emotions, memories, and energetic imprints. You can't see it, but you can feel it. When the plant interacts with that field, it amplifies what's already there. That's why for some it unlocks intuition, sensitivity, and presence. For others, it reveals chaos. That chaos isn't random. It's the leftover energy that hasn't been cleared. Think of the subtle body like a musical instrument. When it's in tune, cannabis acts like a bow on a string, drawing out resonance, harmony, even silence. But when the instrument is dusty, untuned, or out of alignment, all the plant does is crank up the noise. And in that noise, people often mistake volume for wisdom. You feel more but don't necessarily see more. You're just making noise inside, and when your inner space is crowded, clarity becomes impossible. Traditions that get this talk about energetic hygiene. This isn't mystical fluff, it's spiritual hygiene. Just like bathing cleanses the body, practices like fasting, breathwork, chanting, cold exposure, prayer, and silence purify your energy field. They stabilize your system so when you open the door with a plant like cannabis, you don't step into a room full of unresolved junk. In Reiki and other energy work, cannabis is sometimes called a field disruptor. Not because it's harmful, but because it spikes sensitivity. That spike can help you access subtle energies, but can also leave ungrounded people feeling unstable or chaotic. Sensations get intense, but control slips away. The same thing happens in Kundalini work. Cannabis is known for waking up dormant energy before the body is ready to handle it. You feel open, electric, even euphoric, until you crash, spiral, or can't ground the experience in a meaningful way. Amazonian shamans say every plant opens you up, but every plant also tests you. And cannabis is no different. They believe each plant carries its own consciousness, spirit, or frequency. When that spirit enters you, it communicates, not with words, but through emotions, memories, and energetic sensations. If you're not mentally, emotionally, and spiritually clear, that message gets scrambled. The plant gets distorted by your own leftover stuff, and instead of clarity, you get confusion dressed up as insight. That's why after intense cannabis use, many feel drained, foggy, or emotionally raw, not because the plant is draining by nature, but because they showed up unprepared, without cleansing, without boundaries, without respect. It's like plugging a delicate instrument into an amplifier with frayed wires. You don't get music, you get noise, and the longer you stay plugged in, the more your sensitivity dulls. Cannabis interacts with the subtle body like fire with a dry forest. It spreads, it consumes, it brings light, but only if the space is clean. Otherwise, it just burns recklessly, without grounding, without clarity, without limits. What was meant to elevate can fall apart. You lose focus, lose willpower, and start living in a fog that feels peaceful but actually hides a dull monotony. The subtle danger is that you call that fog calm, that you confuse numbness for healing. But healing isn't numbness. Healing is clarity. Healing is power coming back, not power on pause. Used without energetic awareness, cannabis can hide imbalance instead of fixing it. So ask yourself, is your system clean enough for clarity? Have you prepared your inner temple before inviting the plant in? Because cannabis doesn't clean the house, it just turns on the lights. What you see depends entirely on what's already inside. Back in the day, marijuana was only used when the soul was ready. Now it's used because it's the weekend. The change didn't happen overnight. It was slow, subtle, dressed up as freedom. What was sacred became symbolic. What was intentional became impulsive. We moved from smoke as spirit to smoke as content. And in that shift, the plant didn't lose its power. We just lost the way to hold it. In the Rastafari tradition, cannabis wasn't something you smoked alone in your room to deal with stress. It was part of sacred reasoning sessions, ritual gatherings for philosophical and spiritual reflection. Smoke rose alongside chants, prayers, and drum beats. It was a communal rising, not a personal escape. It wasn't about feeling good. It was about aligning with Yah God, the source. And if your heart wasn't clear, the herb would show you. It wasn't entertainment. It was initiation. In the African diaspora, especially in Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda, marijuana wasn't always central. But the idea behind its use was, every plant was seen as carrying axe, a spiritual energy, a purpose, a vibration. Misusing a plant was misusing its energy and inviting imbalance. The ritual determined the effect. The ceremony built the container. Nothing sacred was taken lightly. There was no casual use, only communion. But that's not what the modern world wanted. Ritual requires time, discipline, humility. Ritual is inconvenient, and capitalism thrives on convenience. So the plant was stripped from its roots, sanitized for mass consumption, and repackaged as a lifestyle. Now it comes in sleek wraps, promoted by influencers, sold like a wellness smoothie. This will make you feel better. No talk of shadows, no mirrors. Just mood boards, pastel fonts, and shallow nods to mindfulness. The sacred was commercialized. The ceremony was erased. Cannabis became a product, not a portal. Now people get lit while binge-watching shows that feed them more programming. They scroll through their screens while smoking, drowning in empty content designed to hijack their dopamine. No circles, no chants, no silence. Just stimulation on top of stimulation. In that layered chaos, the plant becomes fog, not fire. Numbness, not clarity. Even festivals claiming to be spiritual, burning incense, playing background music, selling chakra stickers, often reduce cannabis to background noise. Ritual turns into a performance, ceremony into fantasy. The plant's true essence, the part that could transform, disturb, awaken, is buried under layers of style. But cannabis doesn't care about style. Its spirit is ancient, wild, and relentless. It doesn't care about your branding. It cares about your intention. Without a container, its energy spills out, flowing into your distractions, anxieties, and unhealed wounds. Without direction, it just amplifies where you already are. That's why some people feel inspired while others feel stuck. The same plant, different container. When we lose ritual, we lose the structure that made the experience sacred. Without it, what's left is entertainment pretending to be healing, a shadow of what was once sacred. The plant hasn't changed. How we use it has. Until we reclaim the container, we'll keep wondering why the experience feels shallow, inconsistent, or even chaotic. It's not that cannabis lost its power. We stopped preparing to receive it. Ritual was never a show for the divine. It was a way to prepare, to clear your mind, energy, and heart. So when the plant opens the door, you can walk through with grace, not confusion. We didn't lose the sacred. We lost the ability to recognize it. The most dangerous lie is thinking good intention alone is enough. That if you have good intentions, the plant will guide you. But marijuana, like all true spiritual allies, doesn't work on feelings. It responds to energy, to readiness, to the clarity of your inner world, not positive thinking. Many come to it curious but without direction. They get high to feel better, to think deeper, to escape boredom, or to soften stress. But they forget, the plant doesn't give you peace. It reveals whether peace was already there. Used wisely, cannabis can be a powerful ally, helping you quiet the ego's noise, see your patterns clearly, and loosen your grip on your internal stories. But the secret isn't really the plant itself. The secret is who you are when you encounter it. Without structure, the experience gets slippery. Without reflection, insight fades. Without grounding, opening becomes fragmentation. So how do you use the plant without it using you? First, by understanding that cannabis should never be your first response. If you feel anxious, don't smoke. Sit with it, ask it questions. If you feel restless, don't run. Move your body, breathe deeply, write in a journal. Only when your body is calm and your mind is clear can the plant be a tool for refinement instead of disruption. Before you use it, ask yourself, what am I really seeking? Clarity or comfort? Truth or a quick fix? Am I reaching for the plant to align or to avoid? There's a big difference between using cannabis to explore consciousness and using it to silence what consciousness is trying to tell you. One is sacred, the other is just another loop. The wisest traditions never relied on cannabis alone. It was always one part of a larger spiritual system. Fasting, silence, chanting, prayer, breathwork, cleansing rituals. These weren't just old habits. They were spiritual hygiene. Practices that prepared the container, cleared the clutter, and tuned the nervous system so the plant could do its deeper work. Grounding practices matter. Smoke in silence, sit on the earth, put your phone away, turn off background noise. Let the plant lead you inward, not outward. Write down what comes up, reflect, integrate, and carry those lessons into how you move, speak, and love. That's where real transformation happens. Not in what you see, but in what you do with it. Cannabis without integration becomes spiritual entertainment. You chase the feeling instead of doing the work. It becomes part of your identity. You start to think your depth depends on the plant. That's when it stops being a chemical dependency and becomes an existential one. You forget the plant is just a mirror. The depth was always inside you. Cannabis just helped reveal it. The real journey begins when you can access that state without anything external. You weren't made to live in the high. Your purpose is to bring what you found there back into everyday life. Insight isn't the prize. Application is. Transformation is. It means being kind without needing euphoria, staying present without chemical help, facing conflict, boredom, and routine, and still staying awake. That's how you use the plant without losing yourself, by never letting it become your source of meaning and always returning yourself to center. The plant can open the door, but only you can walk the path. If you're not moving forward, you're just circling, feeling more without learning anything. You don't need more highs, you need more honesty. The kind that's not always pleasant, but always real. The kind that cuts through shiny illusions and asks, is this helping me grow, or just helping me hide? Cannabis was never meant to be used alone. Across cultures, lineages, and centuries, its spiritual use was almost always collective. Not because people couldn't reach altered states alone, but because those who understood the plant knew that without a container, its power becomes unpredictable, and without community, its insight becomes distortion. The plant can open you up, but it's the circle that holds you. In the Rastafari tradition, cannabis isn't smoked casually. It's part of reasoning sessions, gatherings where the herb is passed with reverence, accompanied by scripture, discussion, chants, and a conscious search for divine truth. It's not about getting high. It's about being aligned. Words are spoken with weight. Silence is honored. Everyone becomes both student and teacher. The herb moves clockwise like time, like energy, like the sacred wheel of life. In that space, cannabis isn't the focus. It's the bridge. Likewise, in some Amazonian and Central African indigenous traditions, though cannabis isn't always the central sacrament like ayahuasca or tobacco, the principles remain. Mind-altering plants are used only when the group, the ritual, and the intention are present. The experience belongs not to the individual, but to the container. The music, the prayer, the fire, the elders, the invisible spirits watching from the edges. You don't travel alone, even with your eyes closed. The circle holds you. It's not just what the plant shows you, it's how others help you interpret it when you return. Compare that to the modern experience. A joint in one hand, a phone in the other. No container, no preparation, no exit strategy. Just stimulus and solitude. What should be sacred becomes just another episode of dissociation. And that's where the spiral starts. Because when you're open but no one is there to help you close, perception doesn't integrate. It breaks apart. You start thinking you're accessing something profound, but there's no witness, no mirror, no calibration. It becomes a private religion of half-remembered thoughts and disconnected insights, and you mistake loneliness for illumination. But when you're in a real circle, something different happens. You're heard, you're seen, you're reminded that your perception is part of a bigger truth. What you experienced matters not just to you, but to the community. You become accountable for what the plant gave you, because the plant doesn't just give. It commissions you. It asks, what will you do with this vision? Will you live differently? Will you serve? Will you heal? In sacred circles, the ego has less room. You can't fake being awake when someone sees through your act. You can't claim transformation without accountability. There's no hiding inside ceremony. And that's why it works. Because it's not about how the plant makes you feel. It's about how the experience is witnessed. The circle stops illusion from becoming doctrine. When you're alone, there's no challenge, no resistance. Everything feels true. But not everything you feel is true. Not every idea that pops up in the high is sacred. Some are projections, some distortions, some just mental noise dressed in spiritual clothing. The circle helps you sort signal from static. It helps you test your vision against shared reality. Even in modern cities, you can create sacred containers. A few friends, lit candles, phones off, a clear intention said out loud, moments of silence before and after, a commitment to reflect, to hold space, not just to journey, but to transform. You don't need a jungle or a temple. You need reverence, ritual, and community. Without them, cannabis drifts like incense in a windy room, beautiful but directionless. The plant demands structure because its spirit is powerful, and like any kind of power, it amplifies everything it touches. In a group setting, it can amplify clarity, healing, and vision. Alone and ungrounded, it can amplify confusion, illusion, or ego. So maybe the question isn't just why you're smoking, but who you're smoking with. Because having a sacred container often decides whether the plant becomes your teacher or just a distraction. There's a point in every seeker's journey when the thrill starts to wear off. Novelty fades, visions repeat, perceptions echo what you've already heard. And that's where the deeper path begins, not with more intensity, but with more honesty. The real work isn't in what you see when you're high, but in what you do when you're sober. Discernment becomes the new high, not stimulation, but clarity, not euphoria, but alignment. Cannabis can open doors. That's never been in question. But opening doors is easy. Walking through them with intention, integration, and humility is what most people avoid because chasing the feeling of awakening is way easier than doing the work of awakening. It's easier to get high than to stand still. Easier to feel profound than to live profoundly. But feeling something doesn't make it true. Seeing something doesn't make it real. Discernment is what separates illusion from perception. It keeps you from confusing an echo with essence. In Greek philosophy, discernment was called krinein, the inner blade that cuts through deception. In Vedanta, it's viveka, the ability to tell the real from the unreal. It's not skepticism, it's spiritual maturity. The willingness to question even your deepest experiences. To ask, is this truth or just what I wanted to hear? Because cannabis will give you both. It speaks in riddles, poetry, emotion. And if you're not grounded, it can build whole belief systems from metaphors never meant to be taken literally. That's where spiritual inflation begins. The ego pretends it's awakened. It starts talking mystical, dresses in transcendence, quotes scriptures without living them. It gets addicted, not to the plant, but to feeling special, feeling in the know. You start mistaking sensitivity for superiority and stop listening to anything that doesn't support that. That's why discernment has to come first before cannabis becomes a spiritual tool. Without it, you're not opening to higher truth. You're just rearranging the furniture in your own illusion. The plant amplifies what's already there. If you carry confusion, it grows. If you have clarity, it deepens. The plant doesn't discriminate, it just reflects. So the real question is, are you ready to sharpen your inner blade? Are you willing to ask tough questions about your intentions, your expectations, your patterns? Are you willing to set the plant aside when it no longer serves your growth? That might be the hardest test of all. Knowing when not to use it. Realizing that wisdom never lived in the leaf. It was always inside you, and the leaf just helped you remember. Cannabis isn't the path. It's a compass. It can point, it can guide, but it can't walk the path for you, and it definitely can't carry you. The plant holds up a mirror, but mirrors don't create. They reflect. They don't move. You move. And if the reflection becomes your focus, you forget what it was there to show you in the first place. This is the moment many never reach. They get stuck on sensation, caught up in the poetry. But mystics, seekers, those who truly walk the path, they go beyond. They learn to trust the quiet after the peak. They learn to hear messages not wrapped in euphoria. They learn to sit with discomfort and ask what it wants to teach. Because the goal isn't to get high, it's to stay awake. Not just when the plant opens your eyes, but every morning when you choose to live aligned, grounded, and real. That's true spiritual practice. That's the path beyond illusion. There comes a time when all tools must be set down, all shortcuts left behind, all highs examined for what they really were. A spark, a sign, a beginning, not a destination. Cannabis isn't the answer. It never was. At best, it's a teacher. At worst, it's just another distraction dressed up as depth. And if you're really listening, you'll know when it's time to stop chasing smoke and start igniting the fire within yourself. The greatest lesson cannabis can teach is that you never really needed it. Not because it's useless, but because its power was always meant to reflect something asleep inside you, something waiting to be remembered. The clarity you felt was yours. The stillness, the insight, the connection. None of that came from the plant. The plant only stripped away what you had forgotten, how to feel. But remembering isn't the same as becoming. The journey doesn't end with what you saw. It begins with what you do. That's why ancient traditions never glorified the plant. They honored it, used it as a gateway, but never as a crutch. Ceremony ended and integration began. You took what you saw and turned it into action, presence, humility. You handled conflict differently, loved with fewer conditions, served from a deeper place. That's the point. That's the essence of the vision. What good is insight if it never changes how you live? If you never change how you live, what good is insight? What good is it if you never apply it to the mess, the boredom, the discomfort of real life? It's easy to feel spiritual in the smoke and silence. It's harder in traffic, in grief, in the daily grind. But that's where true spiritual growth happens. Not on the mountaintop, but in the valley. Not in altered states, but in the daily choice to stay awake when it'd be easier to sleep. Integration isn't glamorous. It's not psychedelic or aesthetic. It's discipline, it's follow-through. It's knowing when to close the door on ceremony and open the door to life. And walk through it with grace. That's what the plant asks of you. Not worship or adoration, but incorporation. You were never meant to become dependent on the teacher. You were meant to graduate. You're not here to orbit meanings. You're here to make the light real, to take the fragments of truth you glimpsed and shine them through how you speak, how you listen, how you show up when no one's watching. That's when the plant becomes legacy. Not just a substance you use, but a spirit that shaped you. Not a drug you chased, but a mirror you faced again and again until it showed you something real. Here's what's real. The sacred doesn't need marijuana. The sacred is already inside you. The question is whether you're willing to live like that, to stop looking for external signs and start radiating it from within. Because in the end, it's not about the plant. It's about you. It's not about what you smoke. It's about who you become. It's not about highs. It's about how you rise above the lows. The plant has shown you a glimpse of what's possible. Now it's your choice. Will you chase the light or become it? If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understand."